She grew her husband's family business to $65 M. Then her husband called her worthless. The next day changed everything. The room glittered with elegance. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the finely dressed guests, who mingled with champagne flutes in hand, their laughter and chatter blending with the soft strains of a string quartet. The banquet hall had been decorated lavishly for the occasion, golden drapes, intricate floral arrangements, and a towering cake adorned with Claire's favorite lilies. It was her 36th birthday, a milestone meant to be celebrated with love and gratitude. But Claire sat at the head of the table, her smile forced, her fingers clutching the stem of her wine glass. The speech was coming, she knew it. Marcus, her husband, stood at the center of the room, commanding attention as easily as breathing. His tailored suit was sharp, his smile wider than ever, and his glass of champagne sparkled in the candlelight. He tapped a spoon against his glass, the clinking silencing the room instantly. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his deep voice carrying easily over the crowd. "Thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate my incredible wife, Claire." The guests erupted into polite applause, turning toward Claire with smiles that only deepened the unease pooling in her chest. She looked up at Marcus, hoping for warmth in his eyes, hoping for sincerity. But what she saw instead was calculation. Marcus raised his glass higher. "This remarkable woman," he continued, "has spent the last 12 years dedicating herself to something bigger than herself, my family's business." Claire froze, her grip tightening around her glass. Thanks to her relentless work, her late nights, and her unwavering commitment, she's turned our humble little company into a $65 million success. More applause. Claire smiled weakly, nodding at the guests who looked at her with admiration. But something in Marcus's tone made her stomach twist. "However," Marcus said, his voice shifting slightly, growing cooler, "we all know that no one can do everything forever. And as wonderful as Claire has been in helping build the company, I think we can all agree." He turned to face her directly, a smug smirk playing on his lips. "It's time for her to step aside and let someone more capable take over." The room fell silent. Claire blinked, her smile faltering as the words sank in. What? Her voice was barely audible. "What did you just say?" Marcus chuckled, raising his glass higher. "Come on, darling, don't act surprised. We've talked about this. It's time to pass the reins to someone else. You've done enough." The guests shifted uncomfortably, some whispering behind their hands. Others looked at Claire with pity or awkward smiles. Her cheeks burned, the weight of every eye in the room pressing down on her. "Marcus," she said, her voice shaking, "we haven't talked about this. Ever." He shrugged nonchalantly. "Well, we are now. And what better time to make the announcement than at your birthday? A fresh start for everyone." Claire's heart pounded. Fresh start. Was this some kind of joke? She forced a laugh, though it sounded hollow in her ears. "You can't be serious. I've spent over a decade building that business, your family's business, into what it is today." Marcus leaned closer, lowering his voice just enough for only her to hear. "And it's my family's name on the building, Claire. Let's not forget where the real value lies." The sting of his words left her breathless. Before she could respond, Marcus turned back to the room, addressing the guests with his signature charm. "So, let's raise a glass to Claire, shall we? For all the hard work she's done, and to the bright future ahead for everyone." The room erupted in applause again, though it felt forced, uncertain. Claire sat frozen in her chair, her mind reeling. Her hands trembled as she placed her glass down on the table, afraid she might shatter it. Her life's work, her identity, reduced to a passing comment in a public spectacle. The applause faded, and Marcus returned to his circle of admirers, laughing and clinking glasses as though nothing had happened. Claire stared at him, her vision blurring with unshed tears. For years she had poured her soul into the business, sacrificing nights, weekends, and even dreams of starting a family. Every decision, every success, every inch of growth, it had been her. And yet, in a single moment, he had dismissed it all. She rose from her seat, the noise of the room fading into a dull roar. Without a word, she made her way toward the exit, her heels clicking against the marble floor. "Claire?" A colleague called after her, concern etched on his face. "Are you okay?" She didn't answer. Her chest felt tight, her breath shallow as she stepped out into the cool night air. She gripped the railing of the balcony outside, her knuckles white. Tears finally spilled over as she looked out at the city skyline, the world around her spinning. For 12 years she had given everything to that company. To Marcus, to their life together. And in return, he had humiliated her. "You're nothing without me," his words echoed in her mind. Her jaw tightened, anger rising to the surface, cutting through the pain. "No," she whispered to herself, her voice shaking but resolute. "You're wrong." She wiped her tears, straightened her shoulders, and inhaled deeply. Something had shifted inside her. She didn't know what she would do next, but one thing was certain: she wouldn't let Marcus, or anyone, define her worth again. The house was quiet when Claire stepped inside, her heels clicking against the polished hardwood floors. The echo seemed louder than usual, bouncing off the vaulted ceilings of the home she had helped turn into a sanctuary. Tonight, it felt cold, empty. Marcus was already in his study, a glass of scotch in hand, as though nothing had happened. He leaned back in his leather chair, flipping through emails on his phone. The calm, detached expression on his face only fueled the anger simmering inside Claire. "Marcus," she called, her voice sharp as she stepped into the room. He looked up, mildly surprised. "Claire, you left the party early. People were asking about you." She ignored the comment, crossing her arms tightly over her chest. "What the hell was that?" He frowned. "What was what?" "At the party. The announcement. You blindsided me, Marcus." Her voice trembled slightly, but she pressed on. "You humiliated me in front of everyone. How could you do that?" Marcus set his phone down on the desk, the frown deepening into something more condescending. "Humiliated you? Claire, don't be dramatic. It was a necessary announcement, and I thought it would be a good time. A clean transition." "Transition?" she repeated, her voice rising. "You're talking about my entire career as if it's a side project you can just shut down. I've built that company with my blood, sweat, and tears, Marcus. I've sacrificed everything for it." "And I appreciate that," he interrupted, his tone cool, measured. "But let's be honest, Claire. You're just one part of the puzzle. It's my family's name that holds the real value. The reputation, the legacy, that's all us. You've done well, but it's time to let someone else take over." Claire stared at him, the words hitting her like a physical blow. "You can't be serious." Marcus sighed, as though he were speaking to a child who couldn't grasp a simple concept. "Look, you've done your part, and it's not like I'm kicking you to the curb. You'll still have a role, something advisory maybe. But CEO, that's not where you belong anymore." "Not where I belong?" Her voice cracked with disbelief. Marcus stood, swirling the scotch in his glass. "You should be grateful, Claire. Most people would kill for the opportunities you've had. You married into a powerful family. You had access to resources most people can only dream of." Her anger flared, cutting him off. "Resources? That's what you think this is about?" "Marcus, I didn't just use what your family had. I took a failing business and turned it into an empire. Every deal, every expansion, every decision that made it worth $65 million, that was me." He smirked, a cold, dismissive curve of his lips. "Don't kid yourself, Claire. The company succeeded because of us. The name, the connections. You were a cog in the machine, an important one, sure, but just a cog. The dismissal was too much." Claire's breath hitched, her chest tightening as she realized the truth staring back at her. "You never believed in me," she whispered, the realization slicing through her. Marcus shrugged. "It's not about belief, Claire. It's about practicality. And practically speaking, it's time to move on." Her stomach churned. The man she had built her life with, the man she thought she had been building a future with, had reduced her years of dedication to nothing more than a temporary role. "Who?" she asked suddenly, her voice quiet but firm. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "What? Who are you replacing me with?" He hesitated, then smiled faintly. "My cousin, Daniel. He's got a background in finance and has been itching to get involved for years. He's the perfect choice." The room seemed to tilt. Marcus had not only dismissed her efforts but had been planning this behind her back. Claire's jaw tightened. Without another word, she turned on her heel and strode out of the study, Marcus's calm, mocking voice following her. "Don't take it personally, Claire. It's just business." The following day, Claire couldn't shake the storm raging inside her. She had barely slept, her mind replaying Marcus's words over and over. Every moment of effort, every sleepless night, every sacrifice, it had all been for this. Something didn't feel right. She entered Marcus's study while he was out, the same cold detachment lingering in the air as she sat at his desk. Her eyes scanned the surface, neatly organized files, a few legal pads and his laptop. Then, in one of the drawers, she found them. Documents, contracts, legal paperwork detailing the process of transferring power from her to Daniel. Her name was everywhere, but not in the way she had expected. The language was cold, clinical. Claire Hamilton's role has been deemed non-essential for the continued success of the company. Her breath caught as she read the clause about her severance, a mere fraction of what she deserved. Worse, there was a section outlining her declining performance, citing vague and baseless reasons that she knew Marcus had fabricated. Her hands trembled as she flipped through the pages, bile rising in her throat. He had been planning this for months. That evening, Marcus returned home to find Claire waiting in the living room, the documents spread out across the coffee table. "Care to explain this?" she asked, her voice trembling with controlled fury. Marcus glanced at the papers, then back at her, his expression unreadable. "You went through my things. You think that's the problem here?" she snapped. He sighed, walking over and picking up a page as though it were nothing more than an inconvenience. "I told you, Claire. This is business. Don't make it personal." Her composure finally cracked. "Don't make it personal? Marcus, this is my life. I built that company, your company, from the ground up. And this is how you repay me. By quietly trying to erase me." Marcus's face hardened. "You're overreacting. This is just how things work at this level. You should have known that." Claire stared at him, the man she thought she knew now a stranger. Tears burned in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Instead, she picked up the stack of documents and threw them onto the floor at his feet. "You don't get to decide my worth, Marcus," she said, her voice low but firm. "And I'm not going down without a fight." For the first time, Marcus's confidence faltered. Claire turned, walking away from him and the life she had spent years building. Her heart was breaking, but beneath the pain, something else was stirring. Resolve. The house was quiet in the early hours of the morning, but Claire was wide awake. She sat at the kitchen table, her laptop open, papers spread around her in a chaotic sea of evidence. Her hands trembled as she sipped her coffee, not from exhaustion, but from the sheer intensity of her resolve. "I built this," she thought, staring at the financial reports she had printed. Every deal, every expansion, every success, it all bore her fingerprints. The anger that had simmered within her since the night of her birthday party now burned brightly, fueling her determination. Marcus had underestimated her. He thought she would walk away quietly, accepting his betrayal. He was wrong. That morning, as the first light of dawn streamed through the windows, Claire picked up her phone and made a call. "Claire?" A familiar voice answered, slightly groggy but warm. "Rachel, I need your help," Claire said, her voice steady but urgent. Rachel had been Claire's closest friend in college, a sharp and driven woman who had gone on to become a top-tier corporate attorney. They had drifted apart over the years, their lives taking different paths. But if there was anyone Claire could trust now, it was Rachel. "Of course," Rachel replied. "What's going on?" Claire hesitated for a moment, then poured out the entire story: Marcus's betrayal, the documents she'd found, and the plan to oust her from the company she had spent over a decade building. By the time she finished, Rachel's voice was firm and clear. "Meet me at my office. Bring everything you have." Later that day, Claire sat across from Rachel in a sleek downtown office, the sun gleaming off the polished surfaces of the conference table. Rachel scanned the documents Claire had brought, her sharp eyes narrowing as she flipped through each page. "When did you find these?" Rachel asked. "Last night," Claire replied. "I knew Marcus was planning something, but I didn't realize how far he'd gone." Rachel leaned back, tapping a pen against her notepad. "This is worse than I expected. But it's also good for you." "Good for me?" Claire asked, incredulous. Rachel nodded. "Claire, you've spent 12 years growing this company. You've created strategies, negotiated contracts, and built relationships that turned it into a $65 million enterprise. That's not just helping. That's leadership. And legally, you're entitled to far more than Marcus thinks." "But the company is in his name," Claire said, her voice uncertain. Rachel shook her head. "That doesn't matter as much as he thinks it does. If we can prove that your contributions were critical to the company's success, and I'm certain we can, you have a case. A strong one." With Rachel's guidance, Claire began to gather evidence. She spent hours combing through old emails, financial reports, and contracts, meticulously piecing together the timeline of her contributions. The expansion into new markets, her strategy. The multi-million-dollar deal with an international distributor, her negotiation. The cost-saving measures that increased profits by 40%, her initiative. She printed emails from clients praising her leadership, pulled reports showing the company's growth during her tenure, and even found old presentations she had given that outlined the exact steps she had taken to secure success. Every document was another piece of ammunition, proof that Marcus's claims were baseless. A week later, Claire and Rachel met again, this time to finalize their plan. Rachel spread the collected evidence across the table, a satisfied smile on her face. "This is more than enough to make Marcus sweat. We're going to hit him where it hurts." Claire arched an eyebrow. "And where's that?" Rachel slid a draft of a legal letter across the table. "Here, we're going to send this through my firm. It's a formal notice informing Marcus that if he proceeds with removing you, we'll be filing a lawsuit for breach of fiduciary duty, defamation, and damages. And trust me, Claire, it's not an empty threat. We can win." Claire stared at the letter, her chest tightening. It was bold, aggressive, and exactly what she needed. The letter arrived at Marcus's office the following Monday morning. He was in the middle of a meeting when his assistant interrupted, handing him the envelope with Rachel's firm's logo stamped on the front. Marcus opened it, his face darkening as he read the contents. By the time he reached the end, his hands were clenched into fists. That evening, Claire received a call. "Claire." Marcus's voice was sharp, his usual smooth confidence replaced by irritation. "Marcus," Claire replied evenly. "What the hell is this?" he snapped. "A lawsuit? You're seriously threatening me." "It's not a threat," Claire said calmly. "It's a promise. You tried to erase me, Marcus. To destroy everything I've built. Did you really think I'd just let that happen?" Marcus let out a bitter laugh. "This is my family's company, Claire. Do you have any idea what you're getting yourself into?" "I do," Claire replied firmly. "And it's our company. I earned my place in it. I'm not going to let you take that away." Marcus was silent for a long moment before muttering, "You're making a mistake." "No," Claire said, her voice steady. "You did." She ended the call, her heart racing. For the first time in weeks, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Power. The next morning, the fallout began. Marcus's legal team contacted Rachel, requesting a meeting to discuss terms. The evidence Claire had gathered was overwhelming, and Marcus's lawyers knew it. Behind the scenes, whispers began circulating through the company. Employees who had long admired Claire's leadership started to rally around her, sharing their own stories of her contributions. It was clear to everyone, Claire wasn't just a part of the company's success. She was the success. As Claire prepared for the upcoming legal battle, a quiet sense of determination settled over her. This wasn't just about protecting her career. It was about reclaiming her worth. And she wasn't backing down. The conference room was oppressively silent as Claire walked in, her heels clicking confidently against the polished floor. She wore a crisp navy suit, her shoulders squared, her head held high. Despite the tension radiating from the room, she refused to let it touch her. Marcus was already there, lounging at the far end of the long table, his arms casually crossed. His smirk was as condescending as ever, a look that screamed he had already won. On either side of him were his high-priced legal team, all sharp suits and colder stares. Claire, Marcus greeted smoothly, his tone dripping with false charm. "Glad you could make it. Though I think this little stunt has gone far enough, don't you?" Claire ignored his comment and sat down across from him, Rachel taking the seat beside her. "We'll see about that," Claire replied calmly, her voice steady. The meeting began, and Marcus's lead attorney wasted no time launching into a dismissive opening statement. "Miss Hamilton's claims, while dramatic, lack any substantial legal basis," the man said, his voice cutting and authoritative. "This company has always been, and remains, the property of the Bennett family. Any contribution Ms. Hamilton has made was part of her role as the spouse of Mr. Marcus Bennett. Her role, we might add, was not critical to the company's success." Marcus leaned back in his chair, smirking as though the outcome was already a foregone conclusion. Rachel, however, remained unfazed. When it was her turn to speak, she stood, her gaze sharp and unyielding. "Let's set the record straight," Rachel began, her voice steady. "Claire Hamilton did not merely contribute to this company. She built it, and we have the evidence to prove it." She opened a binder and began distributing copies of documents to everyone in the room. "These are financial reports detailing the company's growth over the last 12 years, Rachel continued. "As you'll see, the exponential increase in profits coincided directly with Ms. Hamilton's tenure as head of strategy and operations. These results were not coincidental, they were the product of her leadership." Marcus's smirk wavered slightly. but he quickly masked it. Claire then took the floor, her voice calm but powerful as she laid out her case. "I spearheaded the expansion into international markets," she began, pointing to a specific section of the report. "This deal alone accounted for 30% of the company's revenue growth in the last 5 years. Marcus wasn't even involved in those negotiations." She turned to another page. "These cost-saving measures, I introduced them. They reduced operational expenses by 40%, allowing us to reinvest in new technologies and infrastructure." Again, Marcus had no part in those decisions. As she spoke, the room began to shift. The smug confidence on Marcus's face started to falter, replaced by a subtle tension. Rachel handed out another set of documents, emails from major clients praising Claire's leadership and expertise. "This," Rachel said, "is further proof that Miss Hamilton was not just a participant in the company's success. She was the success." The turning point came when Rachel called in witnesses. The door opened, and one by one, senior employees entered the room. These were people who had worked alongside Claire for years, who had witnessed firsthand her dedication and brilliance. The first was the company's head of sales, a man who had been with the business since its early days. "I've worked here for over 20 years, he said, his voice steady, "and I can say without hesitation that the company wouldn't be where it is today without Claire. She was the one who saw the potential for growth when no one else did. She led us through the toughest challenges and never took shortcuts. If anyone deserves credit for our success, it's her." Others followed, echoing similar sentiments. They spoke about how Claire's leadership had inspired them, how she had been the driving force behind every major milestone the company had achieved. Marcus sat rigidly in his chair, his jaw tightening with each word. Then came the bombshell. Rachel slid another set of documents across the table, her expression deadly serious. "These are records of questionable transactions made by Marcus Bennett over the last 3 years," she said. "Transactions that suggest mismanagement and a misuse of company funds." The room fell silent. Marcus's attorneys exchanged uneasy glances as they quickly scanned the documents. Claire leaned forward, her gaze locking onto Marcus. "You tried to paint me as unfit to lead, Marcus. But the truth is, you're the one who's been jeopardizing the company's future." Marcus's face flushed red with anger, but he said nothing. The board members, who had been silent observers until now, began murmuring among themselves. It was clear that Marcus's credibility was crumbling. By the end of the meeting, the tide had completely turned. Claire had not only defended her role but had exposed Marcus for what he truly was, an entitled man who had underestimated her at every turn. The board members called for an immediate review of the company's leadership structure, effectively putting Marcus's plans to oust Claire on hold. As the meeting adjourned, Marcus stood, his expression dark and stormy. "You've made this far more difficult than it needed to be," he hissed at Claire as they exited the room. Claire met his gaze, her voice calm but firm. "You underestimated me, Marcus. That's on you." She turned and walked away, her head held high. For the first time in weeks, she felt a glimmer of hope. The fight wasn't over, but she had won this battle, and she wasn't backing down. The drive home after the tense boardroom showdown was silent. Claire sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window as the city lights blurred into streaks of white and yellow. Marcus gripped the wheel tightly, his jaw clenched. The tension between them was suffocating. When they arrived home, Marcus slammed the door behind him, his footsteps echoing angrily through the foyer. Claire followed more slowly, her heels clicking against the marble floor. "Do you even realize what you've done?" Marcus snapped, spinning around to face her. His face was flushed with anger, his voice sharp and biting. "You've humiliated me in front of the board. In front of everyone." Claire stood her ground, her expression calm but resolute. "I defended myself, Marcus. I did what I had to do because you left me no choice." "No choice," he sneered. "You've turned this into a circus. Dragging employees into it, airing our dirty laundry. It's disgraceful." Claire folded her arms, her voice steady. "What's disgraceful is the way you tried to erase me. 12 years, Marcus. 12 years of my life, and you acted like I was just a placeholder. Like I didn't matter. How did you expect me to react?" Marcus's laugh was bitter, almost cruel. "Oh, don't play the victim, Claire. You should have known your place. This is my family's legacy, not yours." Her heart ached at his words, but the sadness was quickly overtaken by something stronger. Exhaustion. Not the physical kind, but the bone-deep weariness that came from years of being dismissed, belittled, and overlooked. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a man who would never value her. A man who cared more about control than partnership. "Enough," she said quietly, but her voice carried a finality that stopped Marcus mid-rant. "What's that supposed to mean?" he asked, narrowing his eyes. "It means I'm done, Marcus." Her voice didn't waver. "Done with the manipulation. Done with the constant belittling. Done with you." His face contorted with disbelief. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want a divorce." The days that followed were a blur of logistics and emotions. Claire moved into a small apartment in the city, leaving the grand house she had once called home. It was painful, yes, but also liberating. For the first time in years, she felt free to make her own choices, to reclaim her life. Her first step was reaching out to her former colleagues. One by one, she called the people who had stood by her during the company's growth, those who had spoken up for her, those who had believed in her leadership. "I'm starting something new," she told them. "A company built on real partnership and innovation. I'd love for you to be part of it." To her surprise, many of them jumped at the opportunity. They had seen firsthand what she was capable of and were eager to join her on this new journey. With their support, Claire established her own company, a consulting firm specializing in business strategy and expansion. She poured her heart and soul into it, fueled by a passion she hadn't felt in years. Meanwhile, things at Marcus's company were falling apart. Without Claire's leadership, the cracks began to show. Marcus's cousin Daniel, who had taken over as CEO, struggled to manage even the simplest aspects of the business. Profits declined, key clients left, and employee morale plummeted. Marcus's temper flared as he watched everything unravel. He blamed everyone but himself, Daniel, the employees, even the market conditions. But deep down, he knew the truth. Claire had been the heart of the company, and without her, it was crumbling. One evening, as Claire was finishing up at her new office, her phone buzzed. It was an unfamiliar number, but something told her to answer. "Claire," came the voice on the other end. It was Marcus's father, Richard Bennett, the patriarch of the family. His tone was calm but serious. "Richard," Claire said cautiously, "what can I do for you?" "We need to talk," he said, "in person." The next day, Claire met Richard at a quiet cafe downtown. He looked older than she remembered, the stress of the failing company etched into his features. "Thank you for meeting me," he said, gesturing for her to sit. Claire nodded, folding her hands in her lap. "What's this about?" Richard sighed, leaning forward. "You know the state of the company. It's no secret things aren't going well." "I've heard," Claire said simply. "We need your help," he admitted, his voice heavy with regret. "Marcus made a mistake pushing you out. We see that now. The board sees it, and we'd like to offer you your position back." Claire raised an eyebrow, her expression unreadable. "Why should I?" she asked after a long pause. "Why should I go back to a place where I was disrespected and undervalued? Why should I save a company that treated me like I was disposable?" Richard hesitated, then nodded slowly. "You're right. You have no reason to. But Claire, we're desperate. Without you, the company won't survive. I'm asking you not just as a businessman, but as someone who knows your worth. Please, consider it." Claire leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. But as she looked at Richard, she realized something. She didn't need them anymore. "Thank you, Richard," Claire said, her voice kind but firm. "But I've moved on. I'm building something new. Something better." Richard's shoulders slumped, but he nodded in understanding. "I wish you the best, Claire," he said sincerely. "And I wish you the same," she replied. As she left the cafe, the sun warm on her face, Claire felt a sense of peace. She had reclaimed her life, and for the first time in years, it was truly hers. The months that followed were a whirlwind of growth, healing, and quiet victories. Claire's new company, Hamilton Strategies, had not just taken off, it had soared. What began as a small consulting firm had rapidly expanded, attracting major clients who admired not just her expertise but the integrity she brought to her work. Within a year, her firm was being recognized as a rising star in the industry. The press couldn't get enough of her. Claire Hamilton, the woman who turned personal betrayal into professional triumph. From undervalued to unstoppable, how Claire Hamilton built a business empire after being pushed out. But the headlines didn't define her success. It was the feeling she got every morning when she walked into her own office, where her name was on the door. The energy of her loyal team, the clients who trusted her vision, the sense of building something genuine. She had proven, beyond any doubt, that her worth was never tied to Marcus. The invitation came unexpectedly. A major women's leadership conference had reached out, asking Claire to deliver the keynote speech. At first, she hesitated. Speaking in public, especially about her personal journey, felt vulnerable. But deep down, she knew this was bigger than her. So she said yes. The night of the event, the auditorium buzzed with anticipation. Hundreds of faces filled the seats, entrepreneurs, professionals, aspiring leaders, all waiting for her. Backstage, Claire adjusted the microphone pinned to her dress, taking a steadying breath. "You belong here." When the announcer called her name, the audience erupted in applause. Claire stepped onto the stage, the spotlight warm against her skin. The noise quieted, leaving only the soft hum of expectation. She gripped the edges of the podium, looked out at the crowd, and began. "I want to share a story with you tonight. A story about success, about failure, about worth." She paused, scanning the room, the silence amplifying the weight of her words. 2 years ago, I was told I was worthless, that despite dedicating over a decade of my life to building a multi-million-dollar company, I was replaceable. And for a while, I believed it. A murmur swept through the audience. Claire continued, her voice steady but deeply personal. "I believed the lie that my value came from someone else's approval. I believed that my contributions didn't matter because my name wasn't on the building. I believed that without the validation of the people around me, I wasn't enough." She let the words hang, raw and vulnerable. "But here's the truth I've come to understand. Your worth is not defined by someone else's opinion. Your value is not measured by a title, a paycheck, or the approval of those who cannot see your true potential. You are enough, just as you are. And the moment you stop seeking validation from those who underestimate you, the moment you reclaim your power, that is when you truly begin to rise." The room was so silent, you could hear the emotions settling in. Claire's voice softened. "When I walked away from that situation, I didn't just leave a company. I left behind the belief that I was only valuable because of my association with someone else's legacy. I started over. I built something new, and it wasn't easy. There were moments I doubted myself. Moments where the old voices whispered, 'What if you fail?' But I kept going. And today I stand before you not because I am extraordinary, but because I finally realized my value has been there. And so does yours." The applause began as a soft ripple. Then, as Claire stepped back from the podium, it swelled into thunderous standing ovation. She felt it, truly felt it, this time. Not because she was proving something, but because she had become something. Free. Whole. Enough. As the crowd rose to their feet, Claire's eyes scanned the room, not for validation but for connection. Because this wasn't the end of her story. It was the beginning. As Claire walked off the stage, surrounded by applause and the energy of hope, it was clear her journey wasn't just about personal triumph. It was about inspiring others to reclaim their own worth. Her story reminds us that no matter how others may try to diminish us, our true value lies within ourselves. If this story touched your heart, there are so many more stories like this waiting to inspire you. Subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories, where we bring you tales of resilience, empowerment, and hope. Stories that remind us all of the strength we carry within. Don't forget to like, share, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story that could change your life. Thank you for being part of our storytelling family. Stay strong, stay courageous, and always remember, you are worthy.